ladies and gentlemen, of Lanny Davis. Lanny wrote a great piece about George W. Bush, and as a liberal, I'm sure he'd admit to being a liberal. Lanny Davis wrote a piece praising George Bush on three particular areas. And, of course, Lanny Davis, former President Clinton's special counsel and a member of President Bush's Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board from 2006 to 2007. And Lanny sat here not too long ago talking about his new book, Crisis Tales, 5 Rules for Coping with Crisis in Business, Politics, and Life. And we say hello to Lanny Davis. Hey, Lanny, how are you, sir?
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me on. Sorry I've been a little elusive today.
That's all right. The elusive Lanny. That's what we call you. Anyway, okay, so great piece that you wrote, and you're talking about George W. Bush, and you're talking about 3 things that you really want people out there, especially people on the left who maybe didn't like him or don't like him, to know and remember about George Bush. And I love the last one the most, but we'll start with the first one.
Well, I think the first thing is that he had a record that I disagreed with as a liberal Democrat, but his very famous expression in running for election, compassionate conservative, contains 2 words, and there is a record that supports the word compassion, and I gave 3 examples. The No Child Left Behind legislation has become controversial, and a lot of people who read the piece criticized me for citing that. What they always seem to forget is Senator Edward M. Kennedy, not exactly a conservative, wrote, sponsored, and appeared with President Bush at the White House in support of that legislation. Secondly, it was George Bush that supported one of the major extensions of Medicare ever in the prescription drug benefit. So I just remind people that when it came time to 9/11, he did stand up and inspire the whole nation, that there's a positive side to his record as well as the many areas that I disagreed with.
Right, and then you also talk about the chant by many on the left, Bush lied and people died, with reference to the Iraq War, and you point out that calling it a lie is not accurate in describing the president's rationale at the time for going to war in Iraq.
Well, it's worse than a word that is simply a hate word. It has hypocritical components to it, because if someone accuses George Bush of lying, they also have to accuse most of the progressive Democrats, 27, including Senator Chuck Schumer, who isn't exactly a conservative, who voted for the war resolution believing that they were weapons of mass destruction. They also have to say that President Clinton lied and the intelligence community lied in thinking they were weapons of mass destruction. They have no factual basis for that. Indeed, the facts are that everyone believed they were weapons of mass destruction. Now, it's one thing to say, yes, there were weapons of mass destruction. That means chemical and biological, not nuclear, where there was evidence of both of chemical. It doesn't matter. The war was a mistake. I happen to agree with that. But they say that George Bush lied about weapons of mass destruction. That's not only false, it's hypocritical, because they're not mentioning all the Democrats and all the other people in the intelligence community who agreed with George Bush.
Absolutely. And, of course, they say that they sent Colin Powell out to lie. And, of course, we know that Hans Blix himself said, since we don't know, Saddam Hussein says he got rid of them all, the ones he had, but since he won't provide us the where and the when and the how, we must assume he had them. General Franks wrote in his book that the King of Jordan said to him, you guys better be ready with chemical suits, because he's going to use what he has against you when you invade. So even they thought he had them. So, yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, Lanny, because not too many people, on the left will come forward and admit that. Now, the other one, and you've told this story before, as you allude to in the piece. You went to Yale, the same residential college at Yale Davenport, with George Bush, and there was an incident that you witnessed, which to me, and it could have been defending any kind of person who was being picked on, but it just speaks to who this man really is in his heart. And why don't you talk about that story?
Well, thanks for asking me to. I've actually written about this before, and people have said, oh, that was just an aberration. Oh, no, it's not. It is typical through all the years, this is 40 years that I've known this guy. And by the way, I didn't vote for George Bush, wouldn't vote for him if he ran, because I disagree with him on most issues. And by the way, I was against the Iraq War, even if there were weapons of mass destruction, because I didn't think that we'd have the ability to hold and occupy that kind of an occupation lasting years and years. I turn out to be right, but you know what? That's just with the wisdom of hindsight. I might have been wrong. They might have actually taken out Saddam Hussein, this evil dictator, and actually found weapons of mass destruction. So just want to be clear that I have my disagreements with George Bush when I'm about to tell the story about what a great man and character and person he is. So we're sitting in Davenport College, probably the fall of 65, 66, I forget, in my junior or senior year when we were together. And a guy that we all knew in those days, the word wasn't gay. There was an uglier word that I won't repeat on the air. Then somebody said, oh, there goes the blankety blank. Now, we all knew that that was an ugly word, like the N word is in race relations. And I hated hearing that word, and I should have spoken up. I didn't, because in those days, silence was a way to get along. George Bush, being George Bush, not giving a you-know-what about what people thought other than him speaking his mind and being very comfortable in his own skin, said, hey, knock it off. Why don't you walk in his shoes and feel how he feels? And I said, whoa, this is not the George Bush party guy that my fraternity brother at Peak Delta Kappa Epsilon. This is a guy that I got to look into and get to know better. And that's when our friendship began. And not only is he that kind of a person, sensitive to others and caring about others. And that doesn't mean I agree with him. As I said, I wouldn't vote for him for president.
No, you've made that clear. You also
He's a great person, great character, somebody you'd want to be a friend with through thick and thin.
And finally, Lanny, you also make it clear in the piece that your mom would never vote for him either, but she would have the same opinion of him as you, and it's based on how he treated his dog Barney and what he said about Barney after Barney passed. Why don't you talk about that?
My mom was an absolutist, as my father was in politics, liberal, Democrat, nothing in between, and she never would have voted for George Bush. But she also defined people, good and bad, on the way they treated animals. So if you treat animals right and you love animals, you have to be good even if your politics are wrong. If you are mean to animals, you have to be bad even if your politics are right. So I said, when I read the comment by George Bush about how sad he was when his dog Barney died, that Barney and I didn't talk politics, he was my friend, and I'm sad that he's gone. I knew that my mom in heaven would be looking down saying, well, I wouldn't vote for him, but this is a good man. And that's how I ended my piece.
And Lanny, seriously, it was a great piece. And you know, maybe it's because I just thought the world of George W. Bush, never met him, and I long for someone like him to be our leader in the character issue, the character part of it all. But it was a great piece. I'm glad we found you. I'm glad you were able to come on. And I hope your book is doing well. Crisis Tales.
Crisis Tales, 5 rules for coping with crises in business, politics, and life. And Steve, I hope you don't need my services.
No, okay. Lanny, thank you. Lanny Davis, ladies and gentlemen.